We have Deborah Gross, President and CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, and Charles Eppolito, Chair of the PA Bar Association's Judicial Evaluation Commission. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Charles,
Thank you very much.
Charles, let's start with you. Pennsylvania has a primary election for statewide judges this month. Why should voters be interested?
Judges are the face of the justice system, Larry. They render decisions from the bench which directly impact the lives of Pennsylvanians throughout the state. So this is voters' opportunity to select judges, one judge each for two courts this year, who are an integral part of that process.
How about you, Deborah?
So majority of all cases are filed in state court. It's actually 95% of all cases are filed in state court, and Pennsylvania is one of the busiest state courts in the country. Mm-hmm. And they, as Charles said, they issue decisions on cases that impact our everyday lives, health, education, civil rights, individual rights. And so, we need to pay attention to these races.
Both Commonwealth and Superior Courts are on the ballot this month. And Charles, tell us about the differences right now.
Sure. So the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court are both intermediate courts, appellate courts in Pennsylvania. The Superior Court consists of 15 judges. Mm-hmm. They hear criminal and certain civil appeals from courts of common pleas. When I say courts of common pleas, and you may hear it again, they are the county court level. In addition, the Superior Court hears appeals from courts of common pleas in all matters involving children or families. Mm-hmm. Turning to the Commonwealth Court, that consists of 9 judges statewide. They hear original civil cases brought by and against the Commonwealth, Pennsylvania. They also hear appeals from decisions of state agencies and from decisions by courts of common pleas which relate to the Commonwealth and local agencies. There's also a Supreme Court, which is the highest authority in Pennsylvania. That's not on the ballot in terms of electing new justices this year, but there are 3 members of the Supreme Court who are eligible for retention this year, and the public will get to vote on those in the November primaries.
Deborah, can you go into what makes Superior Court as busy as it is?
So Superior Court, there's an automatic right of appeal, as opposed to the Supreme Court where there is a discretionary right. So the Supreme Court decides what cases it's going to take. Usually those cases are first impression, haven't been decided on, whereas the Superior Court, it's an automatic right of appeal. So that is why it is so busy. And the other thing that I want to highlight right now is that all 3 courts in Pennsylvania have president judges, which are women. This is a first in our 300 years in Pennsylvania. So it's really something that we should be proud of.
Charles, can you tell us how is the campaign for the judiciary run? Because we understand there are some unique aspects to a judicial campaign.
Sure. So Pennsylvania is one of only a handful of states throughout the country that elect judges in what I will call partisan contests. In other words, the candidates run under the banner of a political party with the R or the D right next to their name. The candidates collect endorsements and raise money. Now, to be more precise, prospective judges can't directly ask for donations, but their campaigns, their committees can. Judges also cannot make promises on how they will rule in cases that come in front of them. Mm-hmm.
And so what Chuck's referring to, or Charles is referring to, is there's these codes of conduct and Canada's judicial codes of judicial conduct that even apply to, they apply to judges, but they also apply to candidates who are running for judge.
Mm-hmm. And if issues are off limits for a judicial campaign, what's left for the candidates to talk about? Charles, you start us on that one.
There's not a lot they can talk about in terms of specifics, but I think they can run on and do run on their experience, and other factors that are important to serving as a judge. And that's why I think what we do is so important, because we can comment a little bit more than the judges themselves can, and we can introduce the voting public to these judicial candidates. So the purpose of the Judicial Evaluation Commission, on which I serve as chair, is to provide the public throughout Pennsylvania with objective evaluations of judicial and attorney candidates to judicial office, and of judges who are eligible for retention at that appellate court level. So I think the work of the JEC is so critically important, in part because the judges themselves can't campaign about what they're going to do, right, and the decisions they're going to make. But the goal of the JEC statewide is to provide information to assist voters in choosing candidates who are best suited to serve as fair, impartial, and knowledgeable jurists at the state's highest appellate courts.
Well, Deborah, let's pick up the thread of what Charles is saying here and consider just what kind of relevant experience should voters take notice of. What's on your list?
So, first, the candidate needs to be admitted to the bar in Pennsylvania, right? That's like a no-brainer. The next requirement is that they need to be a resident of Pennsylvania for a year. There is an age limitation of 75. So if they're a candidate who's 75 or 76, they can't be running. So those are the no-brainers. But then as far as qualifications, right, we want somebody who has the experience, the temperament. They have been in court. They have written briefs. They have done arguments. I mean, there's a lot that goes into, as Charles has said, a lot that goes into evaluating a candidate. You know, you can see some of them are judges. You could read their opinions, see how they've written, how they've interpreted the law. There's just how you can. I'll let Charles speak more to the JEC, but how these individuals interact with other lawyers, how they are involved and give back to their community. There is a lot that you can learn or get to know about a candidate.
Well, Charles, during a campaign like this, a common scenario is for a candidate who is already a lawyer. So let's start with that common path to becoming a judge. At least that's what they aspire to be. What should they take from that experience of the candidate being a lawyer as opposed to already being a judge?
It depends. And part of it is which court are they running for? But because there are some very qualified lawyers out there who may not have served as judges yet, but they could be trial lawyers. They could have a lot of experience either trying cases or involved in appeals. But there is something to be said for a judge who's been sitting on the bench, who's been through this, who's been through the mill, and they've observed cases either at the common pleas level, the trial level, or at the appellate level. And they're seasoned in this. They know, what to look for. They know how to run a trial, or they know what you need to do to decide an appeal. So that experience as a judge certainly is very valuable.
And I noticed, and this is a question for Deborah, that judicial candidates have a party affiliation when they're running in a partisan election. Is that a requirement, Deborah?
That's an interesting question. Is that a requirement?
How
I have
about you,
never seen
Charles?
an independent candidate run for judge, so I don't actually know the answer. Chuck, do you know the answer?
I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
I don't.
Well,
I think that they've always run with a Democrat for a Democratic position or a Republican position.
Well, Deborah and Charles, let me sidestep that, maybe rephrase. What should voters' expectations be if a candidate happens to be running as a Republican? How about that,
Sorry.
Deborah?
Okay, sorry. So technically, they shouldn't have any expectation, right? Judges run under the way our system is set up, they have to run with a party. But once they become a judge, they should be ignoring their party affiliation. They have to be independent. They should not be ruling based on what the party tells them, but based on an independent interpretation of the law and the facts.
So what do you think then, Charles? Does that have any value to it? Candidates being affiliated with a specific party that might just bring up preconceptions in voters' minds?
Yeah, I guess value can be interpreted differently. What I suspect is, because I know the judges, when they're running, like to get their party endorsements, right? So, to have that label attached to you in terms of their party affiliation probably assist them in terms of getting a party endorsement, which the public can and oftentimes may take into account in determining who to cast their ballot for. That being said, as Deborah said, the judges need to make decisions not based on their party affiliation or their politics or anything partisan, but on the facts of the case before them and the application of those facts to the law. They must uphold the law, the rule of law. You've heard it. I also know that what's also important to these judges is the recommendations of the evaluation commissions, either Pennsylvania or the counties that have them. And I know for a fact, I've heard it from judges, that those recommendations are very important as well. And one other interesting note, we've talked at least a little bit about the retention elections. Judges who have served in the position of judge for 10 years in Pennsylvania have to run for retention. When they run for retention on the ballot, I mentioned that's at the general election in November. I do not believe that there's a party label next to their name.
No,
and
there
I
is
think
not.
it makes good sense. And it makes sense because, as Deb mentioned, I think we had talked about earlier, they're not supposed to base their decisions, they're not allowed to base their decisions on political interests or affiliations. They've had a body of work now as a judge for a decade. They're running on that body of work, and their political affiliation at that point should be irrelevant.
Well, Charles, let's look at it this way. And Deborah, are you aware of any data out there that show that voters do indeed pay attention to the political affiliation of these candidates? That sounds like a good survey for somebody.
So I personally am not aware of any data, but I do think that when you look at the results of the election on election day, and how many the voters that show up when you compare, there is a correlation, but I am not aware of any analysis.
Same answer here.
Charles, let's get into the PA bar system for rating candidates, and tell us briefly what the association does in order to award ratings to these candidates.
So it's a rigorous process, Larry. So the process commences when a candidate who's potentially interested in running contacts the Pennsylvania Bar Association, requests an application, and receives a questionnaire. They're lengthy questionnaires. There's one for candidates who are already judges, one for candidates who are lawyers. More than 30 questions. They're fairly detailed, covering the key issues. The judges complete those questionnaires. They then return it to the Bar Association. And that begins what I will call phase one of two phases of the judicial evaluative process. Phase one is investigative panels are appointed. They consist of 3 members throughout Pennsylvania, 2 lawyers and 1 non-lawyer, and they conduct an initial detailed investigation. They interview numerous individuals. They would include individuals specifically identified by candidates as references, but the investigative panels go well beyond that. They identify what other individuals interact with these candidates, and they interview them. It could be employees, coworkers, people that have appeared before them when they were a judge, or across the aisle in terms of lawyers in cases. It could be a community board or a nonprofit or an organization. It could be any one of a number of individuals, but they interview numerous individuals, including those not identified by the candidates themselves. They obtain information available from the disciplinary board of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. That would include if they were while a lawyer, if they were there was complaints filed against them. They reach out to the Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board to see if any complaints may have been filed against them as a judge. They obtain and review writings of the candidates, both judicial opinions and other written work product, public record searches, other searches such as online or social media. The investigative panels interview the judge candidates themselves, and then they prepare a lengthy report based on this voluminous data and information they've obtained. That report then gets submitted to the Judicial Evaluation Commission, and that triggers the second phase. I could talk about the composition of the Judicial Evaluation Commission if you'd like, or I can
Just
go right into
briefly,
the
tell us
process.
who's on that panel, Charles.
Sure. The JEC statewide consists of 18 members, no more than 12 of whom are lawyers, at least 6 of whom are non-lawyers. They are appointed by the Pennsylvania Bar Association president, and they are eligible to serve an initial appointment term of 3 years. They would then be eligible to be reappointed for one more additional 3-year term, but they cannot serve more than 6 consecutive years with minor exceptions. Close attention in those appointments are given to factors, diversity of every type: gender, race, geography, practice, area, type, party affiliation, and the list goes on. And we make sure that in terms of being appointed, and then when evaluating judicial candidates, they must avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of unfairness, partiality, partisanship, or impropriety. It is indeed nonpartisan. This is based on merits. So now, returning to that second phase, the Judicial Evaluation Commission of Pennsylvania receives the investigative panel report. They consider and review all the available information. They then interview the candidate themselves. These are typically lengthy interviews, and the chair of the investigative panel is there initially, and they provide us with additional information. If it's not already obvious from the report, they hear the candidate's presentation, and then the candidate gives an opening statement, and then they're subject to questions and answers, and then they can give a closing statement. And then the candidate leaves, the investigative panel member leaves, and it's just those 18 members, the JEC, and they deliberate for quite a while to make sure that they make the right decision, the best decision for the rating. They can also seek additional investigation or information if necessary. There are 10 standards or criteria that we evaluate. And Deb earlier mentioned some of those of which she's aware for some of the other organizations. But those 10 standards or criteria for evaluation of these candidates are legal ability, experience, character and integrity, financial responsibility, judicial temperament, sufficient mental and physical capacity to discharge their duties, administrative ability, devotion to improving the quality of justice, and sound judgment. And then based on all of what I just said with those processes and those criteria, the JEC can issue primarily one of 3 ratings. The ratings are highly recommended, which requires an 80% vote of the commission. It's a very high threshold. It's very difficult to get. Recommended, which requires 2/3 of the commission, or not recommended, those that are not able to secure 2/3 of the votes. There's one other category that's not recommended for failure to participate in the process if a candidate, for whatever reason, chooses not to avail themselves of the JEC process.
Okay, Charles and Deborah, sorry, our time is limited, so let's get right into the rankings of the specific candidates here. Let's consider Superior Court. Charles, Brandon Newman is a Democrat. He's unopposed, so technically he is unchallenged in the primary, but his name is on the ballot, so we ought to talk about him anyway. He was awarded highly recommended. Tell me in about a minute or so how he earned that rating and the reasoning behind it.
Right. So I can't get into the deliberations themselves. That is of the utmost confidentiality. But we have released to the media and on our websites the rationale paragraph, which explains that rating. So, and that's available to you on the website. But so Judge Newman is currently a common pleas court judge in Washington County. He served in that role since 2018. He oversees family law, criminal law, civil law cases. He's also involved with the Veterans Court Diversionary Program in his county. He served as a representative for his district on the Pennsylvania House of Representatives for terms beginning in 2-year terms, basically 2010 through 2018 is when he concluded. So he was elected 4 times. And, he's been described as having knowledge of substantive and procedural legal issues, well-developed legal arguments, a high level of integrity, and he has good judicial temperament, and he's very involved in the community. So
Deborah,
in a nutshell, that's
Deborah, let me turn it over to you. Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. Do you have a position on Brandon Newman? Did you look into him very much?
We don't take positions. We don't do this evaluation. So we don't take a position on that. We have candidate forums, but we do not take positions.
Well, Charles, let's continue then. Another candidate for Superior Court to consider is Anne Marie Wheatcraft. Now, she does have an opponent in this race, but let's consider her first and try to tell me, I hate to put it this way, Charles, in 30 seconds or so, why Anne Marie Wheatcraft earned the rating of highly recommended. Again, sorry, our time is limited.
Sure. A high degree of professionalism, good judicial temperament, excellent character, undisputed integrity. She's been a common pleas court judge in Chester County since 2012. She was just elected by her peer judges to serve as the president judge for that county. She volunteers in the community. She's involved in treatment courts. She introduced comfort dogs into the courtroom. She teaches newly elected judges. So she likewise was found that she would be able to serve with distinction as a Superior Court judge, and that's why she received the highly recommended rating.
Now, interestingly, her opponent here is Maria Batista, also Republican. However, she got a not recommended. So, Charles, just briefly explain what happened there.
So, for whatever reason, and I cannot speak to the reasoning, Attorney Batista had decided not to submit to the Judicial Evaluation Commission process. So she earned a rating of not recommended for failing to participate in the process. We didn't vet her credentials because she didn't present them to us.
So let's move on to the other court, which is Commonwealth. And Sela Tai is the Democrat there, and she is unopposed. But again, let's talk about her, because after all, her name does appear on the ballot. Highly recommended, Charles.
She's got a diverse legal career. She's been a judge on the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas since 2016. She's presided over orphans court matters, civil and criminal matters, family court matters. Prior to that, she had a great degree of trial experience, state and federal court in a variety of areas. She's known to be very involved in civil rights litigation, pro bono activities. She has known to be hardworking, fair, and her courtroom demeanor has earned her the respect of her colleagues. So she's also received from the Philadelphia Bar Association the Sandra Day O'Connor Award. So for those reasons and more that we don't even have time to get into, she was highly recommended by the Pennsylvania Bar JEC.
And let's consider Matthew Walford. He got a highly recommended rating, and he's one of two Republicans. And again, briefly, a profile there, Charles.
Attorney Walford is an attorney. He's not a judge. He's been practicing for approximately 40 years. He's litigated, from what I understand, virtually all aspects of environmental law in both civil and criminal contexts, civil and criminal court, at trial, and in the appellate courts. Earlier in his career, he served in the Office of Attorney General and the Department of Environmental Protection in Philadelphia and Meadville, which is in Crawford County in Western Pennsylvania. And he is also an adjunct professor. His writings are clear and concise. He's been highly regarded for his work ethic, his preparation, and his fairness and integrity. And for those reasons and others, he earned the highly recommended rating from the JEC.
And let's consider Josh Prince, a Republican in this race, in this primary on the ballot in May. Also got a not recommended rating like Maria Batista. Are you able to illuminate any reasons why it turned out this way, Charles?
Josh, this term was not recommended by reason of not participating in the JEC process. He did not avail himself of the process, and I do not know the reasons. So that's why he earned that rating.
Deborah, let's get you involved again. Now here we are in Pennsylvania, and we elect our judges, of course, but your group says there may be another way to do this, and explain briefly merit selection.
So merit selection can take many different forms, but it has to do with the fact that we don't have judges ask for money, right? There's something inherently wrong with asking judges to raise money. In North Carolina, recently, there was over $6 million raised for one Supreme Court seat. In Wisconsin, there was over $73 million raised for one Supreme Court seat. So this just seems inherently pretty bad. What we propose is that judges get nominated, right? There is an independently, publicly accountable nomination committee, which then would make make a recommendation to the governor. This, the details of this nominating committee really are what is I'll say the meat in the pie. They should also not be involved in politics, right? They should, looking at different nominating commissions across the country, they should be involved from all different branches of government, deans of law schools comprised of lawyers and non-lawyers, reflecting diversity of industry, business, profession, race, ethnicity, gender, age, geography, so many different things. But there is another way to do this where a judge's independence would not be questioned.
So, Charles, what do you think? Are there any advantages to selecting judges by merit instead of voting for them in partisan elections?
Yeah, I think there are advantages of those. I think Debbie mentioned several of those. Look, there's advantages to both systems. I know ancient philosophers have said there's just no perfect system. It's a matter of finding the best system. I have a lot of respect in our electorate, and I believe they generally make good decisions, particularly when informed, which is why we're here. But there are many, many advantages of the merit selection system about which Debbie has just spoken.
The only other thing I want to add is that while we have almost 8 million registered voters in Pennsylvania, when it comes to judicial elections, only 2 million show up. So we have the minority voting for the majority. And a lot of it has to do with people feeling unqualified and scared to vote for judges.
Deborah, what have states that have adopted merit selection, what have they reported about their outcomes?
They have generally been, they've been pleased with it because these judges don't have the pressures of campaigning, raising monies. There's also this added pressure for a candidate who's currently a judge as to what they write in an opinion. We've seen campaigns that become nasty, pulling sentences out of judges' opinions. So this way, without it, the need to campaign, for many different reasons, would not exist.
Well, we only have about a minute left, Charles and Deborah, and this last question will be for Deborah. What kind of effort would be required to get Pennsylvania to switch over to merit selection? Try to tell us in less than a minute, Deborah.
It is an intense effort. We would need the legislature to pass in 2 consecutive sessions a proposed constitutional amendment, which would then have to be presented to our electorate to vote. This has not been done for a very long time with respect to this issue. It was almost merit selection was almost approved at a constitutional convention in I think 1967. So it's been years since this issue has been brought to the citizens of Pennsylvania.
Our guests have been Deborah Gross, President and CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, and Charles Eppolito, Chair of the PA Bar Association's Judicial Evaluation Committee. Thanks for being on our program.
Thank you for having us.